All right, Philip Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. It's now Friday, the 30th of October. There are three topics I want to talk about today. One is how the 1860 election and the election in 2020 have some similarities. The second, I want to talk about the so-called anonymous senior executive within the Trump administration wrote an anonymous op-ed for the New York Times 2 years ago, which indicated that there were a lot of people inside Trump's administration who were trying to contain him and keep him under control. And then the third thing I want to get to is the vote by the faculty members. It happened about 3 months ago at Washington at Lee to remove the name Lee from the school. But let me go ahead and get started with the first item, which is the similarities of the vote in 1860 to now. From a Southern perspective, the key issue in the 1860 general election was the viability of the Constitution's protections for minority rights. The slave states started the previous decade in 1850 with 30 senators, which was equal to the number of Senate members from the free states. By 1860, however, the free states had 36 senators compared to only 30 for the slave states. Now, in the House of Representatives, the South had always been in a minority, and in 1850, they had 39% of the 233 members, and in 1860, it was only 38%. Not much of a change, but still a significant, a minority by a significant margin. Moreover, after failing to get Kansas admitted as a slave state by an adverse 11,000 to 2,000 popular sovereignty vote loss in the state in 1858, Southerners realized that there was little chance of getting any new slave states west of the Missouri River. All such territories were likely to ultimately become free states. As events transpired, all 12 states that entered the Union after the Civil War started in 1861 up to 1896, a period of 35 years. Each of those 12 states added initially 2 new Republican senators, for a total of 24. Not until nearly 50 years after the war began would a new state enter the Union with a Democrat senator, which came with Oklahoma statehood in 1907. And given the ancient Greek wisdom that the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must, after the 1860 general election, Southerners correctly anticipated a tectonic shift in political representation in Washington that would be against their interests. The first 7 cotton states seceded because they rightfully feared that the increasingly powerful Republican Party would ride roughshod over the minority protections in the constitutions, and that Washington would remain in Republican control for decades thereafter, if not longer. In 1896, which was 31 years after the Civil War had ended, the former slave states only had 25% of the 88 senators and 35% of the 355 House members. But during those same 31 years, the Republican Party increased tariffs on dutiable items from 19% on the eve of the Civil War to an average of 45% for 50 years thereafter. The tariffs had 2 effects. First, they created domestic manufacturing monopolies north of the Ohio River and Mason-Dixon line by keeping competitive imports out of the U.S. market. After the Civil War ended, the South was rebuilding her railroads, and railroad iron was priced at $80 a ton domestically as compared to only $32 in Liverpool. The difference was primarily due to American tariffs. Second, by blocking European manufactured goods into the USA, the domestic tariffs made it hard for European cotton buyers to acquire the dollars they would need to pay for American cotton. Consequently, they paid American cotton growers lower prices and also increasingly preferred to buy cotton from other countries such as Egypt, Brazil, West Africa, and India. that did not block European imports with tariffs. Now, the situation is similar today, except the roles of the respective political parties are reversed. This time, the Democrats are anxiously waiting to use simple arithmetic majorities to ride roughshod over Republican interests. The Democrats speak boastfully of dismantling features of the Constitution and governing traditions that have historically protected minority rights. Examples include stacking the Supreme Court, abolishing the Electoral College, admitting Puerto Rico and the Columbia District as new states in order to provide 4 new Democrat senators, and discontinuing the Senate filibuster or cloture so that they can achieve their objectives with a simple arithmetic majority in the Senate instead of the 60 votes normally required. If the Democrats win the election next week, the rights of political minorities may be trampled underfoot for decades to come, just as the South was held into peonage for nearly 100 years after the Civil War. Now, to give you an example of how the Republican Party, Lincoln's party, corrupted the Constitution and governmental traditions to get their way, was during President Andrew Johnson's administration. A Mississippi, this is also after the war had ended and the South was attempting to reconstruct. One Mississippi newspaperman wrote a number of articles that were critical of Republican Reconstruction. So the military district commander down, this was while they were under military rule, the military commander down there threw him in jail, presumably under seditious activity, for seditious activity, presumably. But he then appealed to the Supreme Court under a federal law passed by the Republican Congress in 1867, a federal habeas corpus law that would require the Supreme Court to rule, hey, what has this guy done wrong? Is he in jail for a reasonable reason or not? You've got to charge him with something or something, you've got to have a good reason to do this. The Republican Congress then passed a law after he appealed that said the Supreme Court had no authority to make any decisions or any rulings relating to their Reconstruction Acts, to the Congress's Reconstruction Acts. That's like charging the newspaperman, with a modern analogy, that's like charging the Mississippi newspaperman with speeding. He's going 50 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone. So after he appeals, Congress passes a law and says, oh no, the speed limit there on that road is now 40 and you're speeding. And telling the Supreme Court that, you have to go by this new speed limit. You can't go by the one that applied when he was driving his car. That's exactly what it was. I mean, that's an accurate analogy. Supreme Court chickened out. When the case got up to the Supreme Court, they ruled, hey, Congress has told us we don't have any authority to make a ruling on this case, even though your case, your appeal was filed before they passed that ruling. So, pretty amazing, right? Now let's move on to the second item. Miles Taylor is the guy that wrote the anonymous op-ed for the New York Times 2 years ago in 2018 that said, hey, there's a number of us within the Trump administration that are trying to keep him under control, but we can't identify myself because I just want you to know, don't lose heart. There's a number of us inside here who are Republicans that are trying to keep this loose cannon under control. It was really a shameful thing to do. The New York Times let him write that article and they published it anonymously. They said he's anonymous. But they did characterize him as a senior White House official. Well, turns out when he wrote that, he was 30 years old. He was all of 30 years old. And his highest title at that time had been, if his resume on LinkedIn is correct, his highest title at that time was Deputy Chief of Staff for the Department of Homeland Security, which means he was an assistant to the Chief of Staff. I don't know how many assistants the Chief of Staff for the Department of Homeland Security has, But if he has more than one, then that means this guy Miles was just merely one of a number. Now, apparently he's bright because he was a valedictorian from his high school, I think a public high school in LaPorte, Indiana. Okay, that's bright. But I look, his LinkedIn resume indicates he doesn't stay anywhere very long. He seems to just stay somewhere long enough to pick up a useful title and then just network out of it. Obviously, at age 30, to get an anonymous, to publish something anonymously in the New York Times is itself rare. But to get a 30-year-old guy to be represented as a senior official in the Trump administration, I don't think many people that read that thought the anonymous contributor was a 30-year-old. Let's put it that way. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is the fact about, I don't know, some 3 or 4 months ago, the Washington and Lee faculty voted about 80% in favor of dropping the Lee name from the school. And so I was researching that over the weekend because of yesterday's post about Washington and Lee, when the freshman girl that had won a free scholarship to, a full scholarship to W&L was so ungrateful as to criticize Lee and demean Lee and make an obscene gesture to the audience that was watching her internet video that she was recorded and left on the internet. And nonetheless, we'll just skip that. The Washington Post reported, and a number of other papers reported on this vote by the faculty at W&L, saying that 80% of the 260 votes were in favor of removing Lee. But that nowhere did the reporter tell us how many total faculty Washington Lee had. Was this 260 number half of their faculty, 90% of the faculty? He doesn't tell us. And I looked at all the other places that I can find on the internet, and none of them are reporting the same, reporting that. In fact, the Richmond newspaper, which you would think would be pretty close to this situation, said the vote was 188 to 51. Well, that's not 260. That's 239. There's something fishy. I question whether the 260 is a genuine number. They may have had, it was apparently a Zoom call, and the vote was taken on the Zoom call. And they may have had 260 people participating in that, but I'm not sure they were all true faculty members. And should have been up to the Washington Post to clarify that. They simply should have asked the question, and they were obviously in touch with the W&L people. They should have said, how many of these 260 are faculty? How many full-time? How many, are just, calling themselves faculty because they happen to come in on the call? Now, I did find that Washington Lee itself says, I think they have about 310 faculty positions, so 260 would be a high proportion. But I don't think it's apples to apples comparison there. I think Washington Lee is reporting an accurate number. I think this 260 is probably wrong. And how much wrong, I don't know. But I want, for those of you that want to see the Lee name kept in W&L, I want you to know that I don't think it's as the sentiment among the faculty is as strong as the Washington Post predicts. I mean, the Washington Post just cannot be trusted on anything involving, they can't be trusted on anything regarding the Confederacy or politics or anything. They are a corrupt organization. They deliberately lie. I know because I was interviewed. I had a reporter during one of my speeches, a Washington Post reporter was there. He asked me for a copy of my speech, which was written. I like to have my speeches written because it helped with train my writing skills. And I sent it to him. He said, I'll get back to you on this. Well, he never did. And he said some things that just didn't apply to the written speech, and I could prove that. But nonetheless, that's that. The other thing I wanted to get at is on the first point, how this election compares to the 1860 election. Let me refer you to this book, U.S. Grant's Failed Presidency, although he didn't become president until 1869. What happened in here is during his administration was Southern Reconstruction, and the incident about how the Republicans manipulated the Supreme Court, or actually frightened the Supreme Court, scared it so badly that they actually would not make a ruling on a law that was ex post facto. No federal court would now rule in any situation ex post facto. I mean, they would apply the law that was applicable at the time of the alleged offense. They wouldn't apply a law that was passed later. That's what ex post facto means, applying a law that was passed after the alleged offense. So this book is available at Amazon, and so U.S. Grant's Failed Presidency by Philip Lee. I will sell you signed copies of this for $25 and pay the postage if you live within the United States. In addition to that, I'm still, this is my latest book, Civil War, Causes of the Civil War, also available at Amazon. It's $22 there. I will sell signed copies for $25, and again, pay the postage if you live in the United States. So let me give you the way to get, if you want to buy them, let me show you my email address. And here we go. There we go. There it is. Let me enlarge it. There's my email address. And I want to enlarge my video over here. Okay, that's it. Phil Lee's email. Email me there, Phil_Lee@me.com. I've done this at here so that you don't use the ads. It should be the at symbol, but I don't want some bots coming in here and picking it up. So if you're a real person, you know that this AT should become this at symbol. Email me here and let me know you want to buy the book. You can use PayPal, you can use credit card, and let me know. Give me your postal address, and we'll take care of that. Okay, so I'll stop the share. And so for Philip Lee and Civil War Chat, that's our show. And thanks for watching.